Welcome everybody to our webinar on how to master medical device software compliance. In the next 45 minutes, we'll be learning a lot about the complexity of compliance, why document-based QMS basically is dead, and how to solve the software as a medical device traceability problem. I'm really happy to have two great experts with me today. On the one hand, we have medical device software expert Richard Koch with us, and on the other hand, we have Radbee CEO Rina. And both of them will guide us through the art of achieving agile regulatory compliance with Atlassian Jira. And before I hand off to them to share their expertise with us, just a quick note, we will hear Richard and Rina exchange now for a bit, but that does not mean this is a podcast. So if you have questions, please use the comments function on LinkedIn and YouTube, wherever you join us on, and we'll come back to those questions after about half an hour. And with that, I have the great pleasure to hand it off to our first expert, Rina.
Thanks, Saskia, and hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. I think we are in for a treat today. I've been personally working on this issue of managing design controls for medical technology for a long while, and it's very rare for me to find such experts that are really innovators in that field and harness a lot of modern technologies and modern approaches to make their life easier. And that's basically what Richard will bring us today. He will, so Saskia was very generous saying that we will both present, but actually most of the presentation today will be done by Richard, and I will intervene with some questions and nudges to intrigue him to talk about topics that interest me personally. But of course, your questions will be taken afterwards. And well, without further delay, I will allow Richard to present himself, and I'm really excited to have him here today with us. Go on, Richard.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for your attendance today. Just quickly before we begin, I think it's important to say that this presentation is only my views. It's not advice. You know, you're responsible for your products. I'm responsible for my products. And it's also important to say, because I do consulting, there's no payment for this presentation. There's no commercial relationship between my company and Radbee other than me being a customer. Okay, so we'll move on. But just having said that, I'm obviously a fan of the product. And I think pretty much everything I've requested as upgrades to the product Rina has delivered, and it's really becoming a nice product anyhow. Right, so just to get to know me a bit, what have I done? Before 2011, I was in multinational companies doing finance work, so budgets, forecasting, controlling, this sort of thing. So as you can imagine, lots of compliance work, which is a good grounding for regulatory compliance. Obviously, a lot of ERP implementations, which is not quite software development, I would say. It's more software configuration. MedTech from 2012 to 2017, it was a startup. So I did a lot of things, CFO, quality manager, supply director. We had a traditional word-based QMS, and it was literally silicon gel in plastic tubes for dermatology applications. 2018, I launched my own venture, PureApp. I'll go into that just in a little bit. But at the moment, my QMS is document-based, but all my technical files are basically doc as code. They're all sitting in documentation repo. And what I'm trying to achieve, and I'm sort of almost there, is what I call clause perfect compliance with Jira. And hopefully we can get into that. And I think, the strong message and way I use snapshots is really to verify the clause of the requirements. It could be the product requirements, the regulations, how I meet that, so I can review it and not guess I'm compliant, but know I'm compliant. Okay. And since 2021, I've been doing some medtech consulting to various medical device companies, mainly in Switzerland. 82304, 62304 compliance, tool chain validation, agile compliance, and a few quite interesting product feasibility studies. So that's what I've done. What do I believe? This is my product. So for me to make this successful, to build that app, I have to be the app, which means I have to love my product, I have to use my product, get benefit from my product. I almost love my product. I think the next release, it's going to start to get good. But probably more importantly, for this presentation for companies, you have to love our users. So patients first. I'll have to be a medical device software company, and I'll touch on that in a minute. My developers have to love it, Puri, be compliant, etc. We'll just skip the blah blah there. It's just a few lessons, and just to get into why this whole concept of clause perfect compliance and using agile tools better solves a lot of problems, what I think I'm seeing in the medical device industry today. Okay, so with a lot of the customers I've consulted to, I think generally they underestimate the how much resource you need to be compliant. And I'll show you some statistics from my project later, but it's intense to be compliant, which I'm sure a lot of people on this call know. For software,
so
yep.
Richard, just if you allow me to stress this point, underestimation is really something that I see very often, very prevalent. Please take note of that, especially if you are a newcomer to this field. And this field has now a lot of newcomers because of the SMEMD industry. So believe me, what Richard is going to show you in terms of effort is totally true.
And it's this sort of thing where we're going to develop software, so we need developers. So when they go up the V from code and Git all the way to release, generally you've got like highly skilled engineers, pretty well resourced, but going down the V is generally highly under-resourced, and we'll get into that in a little bit. And another one I found is that experienced DevOps, just generally, but especially with medtech experience, are hard to find, but they're very easy to lose. So a lot of clients say, oh, we had this guy who was really good, but he left. And generally what I found, they leave due to poor organization of projects, because they can go somewhere else and have a maybe a more meaningful job. So that being compliant, having good project management, being agile will help with keeping some of these talents. I believe my forecast is document-based QMS is dead already. They don't know it. I think it's a zombie technology, a zombie approach, and it will die probably very quickly. Hopefully I'll contribute to its death if I can be so arrogant. And what I'm also seeing, there's a real conflict more in traditional manufacturing companies with established, document-based QMS. There's a real conflict between agile practice, development practices, and these traditional template-based QMSs. And they just don't go hand in hand. You need to make a decision. If you're doing software, my advice would be go fully agile, make the transition. A lot of cost training up front, but on the long term, you'll be better served. And due to this difference in approach, development teams and traditional regulatory and quality teams find it hard to communicate. On the leadership side, the people who are leading companies, especially these ones which are going from physical device trying to develop software, there's a generational gap, right? They grew up in a different paradigm, different technologies. They understand documents, but not necessarily Git controls. And that's a real fundamental to be a leader of a medical device software company. I think there's no choice. You've got to get into Git. What I'm finding is that very few companies understand how to use compliance, use your quality management system, use your processes to make better performing, safer, more competitive products. And the ones who can do it, I think they'll have a complete edge. And I've sat in meetings, for example, 12 people around the room responsible for the treatment of potentially millions of patients, going, we just need to achieve the minimum compliance, right? So I think the big companies can do better. I'm not in those companies. It's an outsider's view. But that leads me to the conclusion that, you need to start with leadership, train your leaders first, and then you need to go down into your organization, right? So as a result, won't go into all this, I'll move on, but, I don't think companies know they're compliant. I think they hope they're compliant, or if they've got experienced people, they trust those experienced people through their track record. From what I've seen, I know there are compliant non-compliant products on the market. I think I've been responsible for one being withdrawn, and I really praise that company for taking that step. And you know, if you don't get your software compliant, it just compounds. You take on compliance risk, competitive risk, financial risk, a whole bunch of other risks. And if you're a responsible person, I had to go to the lawyer recently on a project for this. It's not just the MDR, it's not just, you know, Swissmedic, not these regulations. To put a device on the market that's not compliant is potentially criminal. So, you know, I think if you're a responsible person, you want to know you're compliant and not just hope. Okay. So the lecture is over for there, and we'll get into content. So this is how I see the SMD challenge at the moment. Unregulated software, they're the weekend tourists standing on the green hill looking at us. Okay, good on them. But if you're in e-commerce or some other application, you just push code. If it breaks, you fix it, you know, in the next release. In terms of where I think the industry needs to go and where it is going, if we get to this concept of clause perfect compliance, the startups, they're the ones learning, having a hard time, I think. And you know, they'll get there, and I think they have the potential to overtake some of the more legacy companies which come from no software experience moving into medical device software. You know, they've got a starting point, but I think they're struggling. And I also see companies which are doing embedded software for years. Cloud, for some reason, breaks the system. I can't, well, I've got some ideas, but it's bizarre, right? Just the whole cloud and it's bizarre. But anyhow, but pure SAMD, I think, has probably got the biggest approach, because generally led by developers, and they can come up with smart ways to implement compliance. So what are we here to talk about today? We'll have a quick look at what I call the IEC 62304 Design V, the normal V with a few extra bits tied on. I'll give you a very sneak peek at the documentation as code. I'll show you how I configure my Jira board, how I do linking coverage, and then we'll get into some Jira snapshots, examples, and use cases. I'm available after the call for as many questions as we have. This will be super quick. So, you know, this could be a lot longer than it is. So I'm very happy to take questions after. So this is the 62304 Design V. So product requirements, and this V, you've got the color coding, the icons in the boxes. Those icons represent the ticket types I use in Jira. And then also the groupings represents the boards I use in Jira. And then the links are the link types I use. So a product requirement ticket causes a software requirement ticket. A software requirement ticket causes a detailed design ticket, which could be a story, a task, or a bug. And then a risk ticket is mitigated by any of those three. So you can mitigate risks, obviously, the requirements level, but you need to implement in your software. And then there's a lot of detail in your design often. Detailed design is linked to a Git branch. That's implemented in Git, tested in my case, automated testing, we use Gherkin. And then we export our Gherkin into X-ray system tests. And then all the system tests are linked to design software requirements. And some product requirements are validated through testing as well. Not all of it, as you know. And in terms of the effort, yes, Rina.
I just want to point on your V model, the thing that a lot of people are asking, and I just want to highlight, because I think it's one of the most important points. You note that Richard separates stories from requirements. Stories for Richard are in the level of detailed design and very close to the code. And there is another issue type, dedicated issue type that he defined, which is software requirements and then product requirements. So we'll not dwell on it now because there's so much more ground to cover. But this is exactly the point where a lot of agile teams really struggle with. Do I need to have a separate issue type between story and requirement? So guys, I'm happy to convince you at any day that a requirement is not a story. Go for it, George.
Yeah, that's a longer conversation. All I will say is this is how I do it. And you go back to the first slide, this is not advice, but I'm very happy to discuss it. And I have seen a lot of confusion And I really think there's a lot of confusion between traditional agile approaches for general software and putting that in the medtech. So I hate using the word agile because I don't know what it means. I like to see your development plan, see it defined, see how you do it. So write it down, define it, do it. If it doesn't work, change it, right? But you need to make a decision, you need to start. This will probably change in the life of my product, but it works for me now. Now, in terms of effort, okay, so in the last release, I had 569 tickets. Assuming it took 1 hour to write each ticket, that's 600 hours, about 15 weeks of work, right? Just for one person to do, roughly 550 tickets. Now, to make all the linkings here, that is 569 tickets generated about 1,500 links. Now, if you say it takes 10 minutes a link, I could do 6 an hour. That's about 200 hours of work on linking, which is about 5 weeks of work, okay? And I can tell you in a lot of cases, it's a lot more than 10 minutes because you really need to dig through your tickets to find out what to link. But I also say, Agile is incremental. The biggest increment is the first release. And if you get your first release right, then you can really move very quickly, right? So the biggest increment will be the first release, the biggest effort. And after that, if you manage your releases carefully, you just put it as part of your process. But I've seen a lot of companies, they don't get to that point, and as a result, they're never under control. So, unfortunately, we've got to work, right?
Yes.
So we'll leave it there for the slide, and we'll have a look at some detail. So we'll start with a simple example. So this is my document repository. I'm just writing up this documentation now for my 4.0.0 release. And what we're in the design and development file. I organize it pretty much around the 6, 2, 3, or 4 stages. If we go to, I picked software requirements specs because it's nice, it's in the middle, up to requirements down to design. And this is an example of a report I've generated from Snapshot. It's just Markdown, and it's a traceability report from product requirements to software requirements, right? So we've got the product requirements, patients must consent to mandatory legal terms prior to using Puri. And then this is how we implement it in the product. We've got the back-end requirements for, how you set up and manage it, how it works from a navigation perspective, the onboarding consent, and that's pretty much it. I think there should be that's all the consent ones. And it goes on, to different things, tokens, etc. So that's what it looks like in Markdown, a simple Markdown table. And the same thing it looks like, and this is what the report looks like in snapshots. So we'll come back to this. I'll just give you a very quick overview now, and we'll come back to the functionality. So this is a 3-level report, okay? So it's not hard, but it's a little bit more sophisticated. We'll look at a single level report, but you've got some pretty cool features here, for example. So we've got here, by default, I've grouped the report by the epic here, and I can collapse all, I can expand all, and I have it filtered at the moment. So you can see here, you've got the filter icon. If I remove that filter, does that work? Remove that filter, then I should have everything. So, the reason I group it is I use my epics, nothing more, they're just a category. So if I wanted to find something, it's pretty easy. I can expand it, take a look. So what we've got here is we've got the epic, we've got the children of the epic here, which are the product requirements. So this is a product requirement epic. I can see the ticket number, the requirement, the status of the ticket, and then I can see all of the requirements that are caused, the software requirements that are caused by the product requirement. And it's a little bit small here, but for the 3 levels, if I zoom in, and this is a new feature, I think it was put in just a couple of weeks ago, we can actually see the query behind this. So that's super helpful. And I went through this morning just to check my reports before the presentation, and things were not quite adding up, and I could pick it up in the query. And this is also good for validating your reports for your technical file as well. Okay, so it's, you know, it's on the page, you can see it, you can PDF it, you can put in your technical file, and it's there for audit purposes as well, which is really nice. So we'll come back to this in a second, but you know, just like the three little piggies, you got the house of hay, the house of sticks, and the house of stone. For get any meaningful information out of your snapshots reports, you've got to have your data under control in your Jira project. Now, again, we're moving pretty quick here, but I've got 1, 2, 3, I've got 5 boards I use. I've got a product requirement board, software requirements board, detailed design board, which is pretty much the development backlog. I've got a risk board, and then I've got a verification board for X-ray tickets. Again, I don't like non-native Jira interfaces, and a lot of plugins have it, like X-ray. So you know, I manage my test cases in that board, and it's pretty simple. Here, if we look at the timeline, I use the timeline a lot. You know, I can just navigate here, and the query behind this is pretty simple. Just for those who are into Jira, if I look at, I'll just pick anyone. This is the query for my project board, for the detailed design board. So I do the project, obviously, the issue types, which are in the category. In this case, the bug, epics, new feature, story, task, subtasks appear in the board. And then also I label all of the tickets with the SDD label. And the only reason I do that is because the epics are used across different boards. So the only way I can differentiate which epic and which board is via a tag. I think there is another way you can do it, but that's how I do it anyhow. And this is also, we're not really talking about agile here. I get a lot of conversation about how to use epics. For me, they're nothing but a container for child tickets, and that's it. It's a category of tickets ultimately. And you know, from that, then you can, you know, if we come back to the design V here, basically by looking at the different variables, you can get all your reports. So if I want to get traceability from requirements to software requirements, I just got to get the product requirement ticket, link type causes, and the software requirement. If I want to see, you know, which product requirements mitigate risks, it's another simple query. I've got a product requirement, I've got a link type mitigates, and I've got the risk tickets. So pretty much from simple definitions, this matrix here is pretty powerful. And again, I would probably advise against custom linking types between different tickets if you can help it. So you can see I've got just causes and I've got tests ultimately and mitigated. Which makes it a lot easier to do tickets. If you're pushing a lot of tickets, you know, you don't need all these link types to push through, and you can pretty much get everything you need out of it. So if we go into so that's the board. The next step is you obviously need to link your tickets. So here I use a product called Links Explorer. Again, it looks pretty native Jira, pretty nice to use. I've requested upgrades from the guys. They're pretty accessible and they respond. And it's, you know, it's pretty good state now. And so you can see here we've got the filter here, which is filtered on all the software requirements for my release 4.0.0. And basically I've chosen what sort of links I want through there. And you can see here it's a, you know, traceability metric. So for this software requirement, I see the epic it's part of, the software requirement epic. I see it's caused by these product requirements. I see it causes these detailed design requirements, doesn't mitigate anything, and it's tested by this test case. And so, you know, I can just scroll through this and pretty much easily see if there's a gap, you know, is anything uncovered. And again, pretty nice, easy to work with, pretty fast. You know, if you're working native Jira, it's a real time saver. And once everything's linked up, then I can create my reports. So getting into just a level 1 query, how it works. So basically you edit the page in Confluence. So just for those, I don't know people's level, but I was in Jira before with project management, and Confluence is pretty much an HTML based reporting system. And it's actually really a nice interim if you're moving from Word or document based and you want to go to agile. Confluence is actually a pretty nice interim step, I would suggest. So what you've got a widget here. So, you know, if I add a widget, if I look for snapshots, the snapshot widget, you'll just insert that. Here's one I prepared earlier. Click on the widget, click the edit, and you've got this interface. Now, Rina, you know the product better than me, so if I screw it up, let me know.
No, you are doing well so far.
Okay, so you've got here the data. So this is where you query, put your query fields in, query your data. You've got some options here for layout. Here, would you want to show the JQL query I showed before? Again, JQL is Jira query language. And if you want to group it, expand all, you know, if you want to, I think this is duplicating. I don't really use that one. And I haven't used this one too, but maybe in the future there you can use Jira automation by their REST APIs. And it's pretty simple. You can add, what's the maximum levels? About 7 or 8?
There's no maximum. You can go as far as you want. In real life, what I see in the field, we have in production someone who did an 8-level traceability.
Impressive. Okay. So the way it works is
the tool doesn't block.
Okay. So you've got level 1 query. You put the title there, and it's important not to be lazy about titles because, you know, if you skip it, you get confused. Learned from experience. You put in your JQL query. Now in level 1 queries, it's just standard JQL. And that's basically where all the second levels will be drawn from. The links be drawn from that. You can then add what fields you want to display for that level. You can search for them, add them, remove them, drag and drop up and down. And this is actually a really nice feature, a lot better than the native Jira, because native Jira you can't reorder. You got to delete them all and put them all back in. And I think that's pretty much it. And if you want to test it before you save it, because given Confluence, it can be a little bit slow. If you get a result, that's good. Hit the save button. I'll hit update. Now we're not really changing anything here. And again, what you need to be careful of, I haven't changed anything, but if I change the query, I'll get a warning. You just click the snapshot button and it goes away and processes it. And, you know, I'm not sure the technology in the background, but, you know, I think it has to go through, I guess, and search, find the links and construct the report.
So what happens in the background is basically a sequence or one REST calls to Jira, getting the data from Jira and attaching it to Confluence. So basically the data you see here, guys, is in Confluence. It was copied from Jira and brought into Confluence, not the live Jira data.
Okay, yep. So that's it. And there is a snapshot function where you can look at different versions, compare. I don't use that because I export to Markdown. I can use the Markdown comparisons for that. But like I said, a lot of companies are more and more moving towards it, and it can be a really nice feature. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And then you can, you know, export it to PDF just natively, or you've got scroll exporter with a lot of formatting options. And I've got this export to Markdown plugin, which I then use to put into my repo. And we'll show you quickly a 2-level file. This is now a 3-level query. So again, we'll go edit. Take a second, and then we go edit the macro. And let me just check the time. How are we doing for time? I think we're nearly at the end of the 30 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll just go through this quickly. So you can see here I've got 3 levels, and the way it works, and this is when you first get in here, the navigation is really important. You've got the tabs at the top, okay? But then when you click different levels, you'll see the color change, and then you'll also see the data. So the form is the same, but your data will change. So if you're first using it, it can be confusing a little bit. It's not that much, but you know, you think you're on level 2, but you're editing level 1, okay? So again, the same similar level 1 query, the title, these are the epics. So I'm looking for epics with the label product requirement, with the status in progress, and ordering by the epic link. Level 2, and this is where there's a little bit of special. And question for you, Jira. Sorry, Jira, Rina. This epic link equals key, is that custom snapshot or is that native Confluence? I have no idea.
The dollar key is custom snapshot. So what we have done here is extended slightly the JQL to allow the expression of links between the different levels. So epic link equals key equals dollar key, basically will fetch the key that came from the first level and generate this link between the two levels. The hierarchy. Okay. That's the hierarchy.
So that's really important. If you're not referencing the previous level query, you'll get an error or you'll get nothing. Okay. So again, that was a bit of mentally I had to get my head around when I first started using it. But once you know how to use it, it's pretty good. And I have the Jira Snapshots cheat sheet on a link on my browser. So if I ever forget, and then I've noticed here, I need to change these with parent links because, they've changed Jira, which is nice, which is a lot better than what they did. So basically what I'm looking for is anything linked to the epics in the previous level with requirement delivered and then, ordered by description. So that's basically the children of the epic. And then what we've got here is issue in linked issues, dollar key. So anything linked to the previous level, I believe, Rina, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm looking for anything issues in the linked issues to the previous with the link type causes. So the previous level is the product requirements, and I'm looking for any ticket that's caused by the product requirements. So product requirement causes this level and the status requirement delivered. Now, I don't have to filter on ticket type because I know that the only thing that a product requirement causes is 3 types of tickets or 4 types of tickets, and they all belong to my detail design, okay? And I order by description, and again, just a little trick, I make sure that the heading of the description has a nomenclature to it, so it will sort naturally. I don't have to worry about it. And again, pick your fields, etc. So I'm just going to cancel that because we don't need it. Nothing's changing. And we get the report. So the final thing I think is, so for every release, I've got, my release here. And again, for this release, I've moved everything to Docker's code. And what I do is basically got my set of reports here. And then for the next release, I've just got to copy the folder, just update the queries generally with the release number, and, hit the refresh button and we're on the way. And, maybe there's some automation that can happen there as well. But I haven't quite got that far yet. So again, that's all I use Confluence for, is for my traceability reports. So that's the technical side. And just very quickly on the use cases, coverage is not verification. Coverage sees a ticket is linked to another ticket, but it's really important to see the data in the ticket versus the data or multiple data against the other tickets. Sit in a room with your team, go, am I compliant? Is that a good implementation of the software requirement? Is that risk mitigated by whatever, right? And have those group meetings. If you don't like it, open the ticket, change it, whatever it is. And that's one of the really powerful things. So I'm going to stop there. I think I'm out of time. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm very happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Richard, that was exactly on time. Swiss. You are living in Swiss for too long.
my German heritage from a long time ago, yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much, both of you, for Richard, for guiding us through your workflow and explaining all of that. Rina, for asking very pointed questions and getting into the meat. Nevertheless, we still got some questions from the audience that I would like to go into. And one of the first that we actually got, depending on or relating to your workflow, how you define stuff, is if you have user requirements or if your product requirements are at that level. if you could elaborate a bit more on that.
So that's a really good question. And again, I see this a lot. I'll show you my solution. I just see user requirements as just another category of product requirements. It's really that simple. So let me go to my product requirements board. You can see here let me just make that bigger. Apologies, I've lost the stream. There we go. Right, so you can see here, that's why I use the epics. So the epics are just really category of product requirements. And for me, user needs are just one category. Intended use is a category. Data privacy is a category. Clinical needs is a category, et cetera, et cetera. And they all fall under this bundle called product requirements. And if you think of it in that way, it becomes easy. Because I've seen, especially on the document base, where you've got a document for user needs, right? You've got a document for this, document that, and you can never get a holistic view. So basically, I just categorize it. So if we go down here, I've got all my user needs here in different categories. So like I sub-categorize user needs. So, what's a good one? Simple one. Patient must be able to delete their Puri account. Okay, fine. In vitro diagnostics, individual results will display the lot number of the diagnostic that generated results if available, right? I need to probably rewrite that because it doesn't mention the user. User can save results from urine dipsticks. So it's just another category. And I think, also when we look at regulatory compliance, let me just see, where's my labeling? And this is where, when I talk about clause perfect. So for labeling, like these are just the MDR, right? I haven't started the FDA. I go through the PDF and copy paste. It's a pain in the ass, but I can know exactly what I need to comply with. And I'm not sure I've got the report generated, but I can then list it side by side. Again, we're just looking here at the summary. But if I go in the ticket, I've got the clause from the MDR. Yeah, because I'm not medical device yet. That's later this year. I can basically see, what it's linked to. So a lot of these labelings are in the about page in my app. And then I can just see the content of the about page. Does that match the requirements? And then when I go into detailed design, when I design the page, I link all my about pages to my about page, and I can do a review of the ticket, the design, and make sure it's compliant. So again, it's sort of this, step by step. I'm going to stop there at the risk of over explaining. Hopefully I've kind of addressed the question.
Yes, and I want to say I really like this holistic view that puts all the requirements in one place. There are situations or teams that differentiate between requirements coming from different sides, etc., and then it just makes it all more confused and more difficult to manage, to control.
Yeah.
Saskia.
I do have another question about the setup, actually. What is the difference between verification and system tests in this overview?
Okay. So as a general category, X-ray test ticket is just an X-ray test ticket. It's really the context which determines, is it a system test, a verification test, or potentially used in validation. So, as we build the branches, there'll be some, code review in the branch. I will build from the branch, on my device and test it informally. And then when we think we're done, we update the Gherkin scripts, sign off the Gherkin scripts, run them in the branch. And if they pass, we then, approve the pull request. And then we export the Gherkin results into X-ray. So really the differentiation there is what is the state of the branch. So running tests manually or automated off a sub branch, it's a system test for me. And I think that pretty much complies with 62304. When your code is integrated and you're ready to verify, you can run largely, I would say largely the 90% the same set of tests. but obviously in verification you want to do a bit more. And it's really the branch, the state of the code you're working off. And then once you pass verification, for us, we have a PHP backend. We've got a Flutter front end. We do our verification validation tests basically in the pre-production backend, and sometimes in the production backend, depends on the change. We have to justify that in our plans, obviously. And then we use the test flight, and I think it's Google Test on the App Store, whatever that's called, so we can get give end users access to the product. And again, I'm going to stop there, and hopefully that made a bit of sense as well.
Maybe actually just putting in a bit of a technical question, because you touched on it a bit. Is your system based on Git or only GitHub?
Well, okay. Obviously the interface is GitHub, which is built on Git. That might be a deeper question when you say Git. So we have GitHub.
I think maybe it asks, are you doing commits? So do you commit the changes when you update traceability? So you download a new version of the traceability and you.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So on the first release, the first version, basically, I'm just committing straight to the release branch. But in the future, what we'll do is we'll merge the release branch into the main branch. Then the next release will clone it into the next release branch. And then all of the changes, I want to build a documentation backlog. I'll build a backlog for the documentation. And then the documentation will have its own sub branch to the release branch, which will be approved and reviewed, before merging. And again, I think if people can get that, I think the developers will get that approach. That gives you a lot better control over your documentation than, again, what I've seen. Confluence, you can do a pretty good job, I would say. You're getting close, but it's not quite as nice as the Git controls. And in Word, you are so far away from that, honestly. And even these document control systems, Greenlight Guru, SAP, it's such a awful, at least in my view, experience. And I see so many duplications, parallel folders. You never really kind of know what it is, but if it's in your Git branch, you can see everything that's changed line by line, and if you set it up right, you can control it. Yes, any change in documentation should be done through a sub branch and merged and be approved by the first person. And if you want to go further, I haven't done this yet, but I have a theory that you should be able to make pull request approval CFR 11 compliant. So that's your electronic signature. And that way, you're really becoming super agile. No more SAP, no more workarounds with Adobe. Pull request, it's approved, and you're on to the next, So longer conversation, but that's the vision.
We actually do have a question following up on that, because so where do you keep the technical documentation then? Do you keep it in GitHub, or do you have something on Confluence for that as well?
No, so basically everything goes from Jira and Confluence into the Git repository. So Jira is a project management tool, and it's not the final storage of the results. The Git repository is. And again, Confluence I only use for the traceability reports, and then the outcome of that report is put into the Git repo. So the whole documentation pretty much at the moment is in Git, apart from some old validation studies which are just linked on the Google Drive, and I'll get them on PDF into Git at some point. But yeah, Git all the way.
We have one other question about the approach, generally speaking. If your risk management approach is divided in process and technical or chance risk areas, how do you organize that?
Yeah, so again, what I've seen in big companies, and I think it's more of an organizational issue, I've seen, like clinical risk separated from cyber risk, separated from usability risks. and there's not one risk matrix you can find in the organization. It's kind of split. So again, I use the same approach I did for requirements. So if we go to my risk board, you'll see that risks coming from the code, so the frameworks, the code errors, this sort of things. Risks I'm inheriting, so the product people enter in vitro diagnostic information, so the risk from entering, information for use risks, etc., etc. So again, it's just a category here ultimately, and I can get it all in one spot. But if I want to pull out usability risks, I can filter on that, and I can produce a usability risk report. Cybersecurity risk, I can do that, because ultimately it's one product, and we're delivering one product, and everything needs to come into that. And I think you said process risk. I assume here, and I don't know, if you're talking about the use process of the product. In that case, that's definitely in here. So if I look at the, in the risk activities, I look at how the products use the process from a user point of view. I look at, my detailed design. I've got mermaid diagrams showing how the data flows and what's involved. And we do reviews on that from a technical perspective to look at data risk, security risks, etc. If you're talking about risk from my development process, then that's in my quality management system, not in my product file. But again, I'm not 100% sure where you're coming back from the process side, but hopefully I've somewhat addressed it. But I can stay around after and discuss if you like.
One last question that we have in the chat. You mentioned it during your presentation and also throughout the questions every once in a while, the IEC 62304, and we have the question if you have a mapping to that. If you could, as a last question, say a bit more about that.
So I do, but that's for my mapping from 62304 to my quality management system, not to my product file. And as I said before, when I first built it a few years ago, I did it all in Excel. So that mapping is in an Excel table. But where I'd actually love to get to, and I've started building it, is a quality management project. And you can actually build your processes ticket by ticket, right?
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, and then you can have a, like a board for your 62304 requirements, 13485, 14971, whatever. And you can link them not to the process, but the process step you comply with. And then you can look at your process, and you can have the standard on one side, and do I comply? And then you can reverse it, look at the standard and your process, does it comply?
You can build your whole quality manual this way.
Absolutely, yeah. Unfortunately, I'm self-funded. I do it myself. I've got to make money first, and then we'll invest in that. But yeah,
Absolutely.
And again, I think it's the when you think about Jira somehow sophisticated database, every ticket is like a field with elements. It's up to your own creativity on how you want to do it. And I think again, these word-based things, like I said, they're dead. And just moving to Jira to do a lot of your quality management system, you just it's functionally a lot better. But again, the tools are there. It's the organization, especially the larger organizations. They're invested, they're trained, and I think the benefits are there long term. But leadership has to see the benefits first and make the effort to turn the ship, right?
Absolutely.
And that's more change management than than the actual technique. But yeah.
And the bigger the ship, the bigger the challenge to shift course.
Yeah, but I don't know. I put a post in an investors group, and I don't know if there's any investors on this, but I really see, for example, if you look at Swiss medtech, I think there's potential businesses around today that won't be around in 10 years due to outdated processes, because Swiss engineering, precision engineering is very good, but we're moving to a digital future, And I would suggest that every medical device company have to become medical device software developers without question, just to keep up with the rate of technology. And the first step to that, there's a couple of approaches, but first step to that is get your quality management department to be trained, understand Git, understand ticketing based systems, and you don't have to transform everything, but do it one by one. I'm updating risk management procedure this year. Let's do a parallel, right? Still keep your old system, but let's do the redesign in a project, right? So we're not changing things straight away. We're preparing it somewhere else and using the legacy system for experience. And then over time, you will transform, because people, I came from the traditional world. This has taken me a long time to get where I am today. It's a big wall to climb over. I'm 52, old dog doesn't learn new tricks. But I would suggest it's imperative for industry. And the ones who can do it quickly and get on top of it, I think there's a big advantage in competitiveness and potentially cost savings or faster development cycles, better products, and lower compliance risk. So I'm going to stop selling this. Obviously, I'm sold, but
Wow.
That was a lot of input, a lot of really great meat in those bit longer than 45 minutes that we talked now. Richard, thank you very much for sharing everything that you shared with us today. The recording is available later if you want to rewatch something, because as Richard mentioned a few times, there's a lot in there. At the same time, Richard, you can contact him on LinkedIn. He's linked on our speaker page. If you have any question, he agreed to get in, or that you can get in touch with him, and he's happy to have an exchange with you. So having said that, for now, for today, we're going to take a little break and digest what we just heard. And Richard, again, thank you very much for being here. Rina, thank you very much for being here as well, guiding us through
the audience
him.
Thank you to the audience for hanging around.
Thank you.
And we're looking forward to the next webinar, which is already scheduled. So keep an eye on our announcement that will come soon. And we would love to see you in the next round. Have a great rest of the day. Bye.
Bye-bye.